Tottenham fans, I am going live at exactly the same time as you because I have just heard that Daniel Levy has stepped down as chairman of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. The moment that a huge proportion of the Tottenham fan base has been waiting for has happened. Tottenham have announced it on their official site, and for the first time of many, I'm sure I will read this out. Tottenham Hotspur announces that Daniel Levy, as they try and do a classic Tottenham trying to sell as they do it, Tottenham Hotspur announces that Daniel Levy has today stepped down from his role as executive chairman after nearly 25 years. Blah, 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 blah. As part of its succession planning, the club has made a number of senior appointments, Vinay, Thomas Frank, etc., etc. Daniel Levy said this: "I'm incredibly proud of the work I've done together with the executive team and all our employees. We have built this club into a global heavyweight competing at the highest level. More than that, we have built a community. I was lucky enough to work with some of the greatest people in this sport, from the team at Lily White House and Hotspur Way to all the players and managers over the years. I wish to thank all the fans that have supported me over the years. It hasn't always been an easy journey, but significant progress has been made. I will continue to support this club passionately." Peter Charrington, non-executive chairman, said, "I'm very honored to become non-executive chairman of this extraordinary club. And on behalf of the board, I would like to thank Daniel and his family for their commitment and loyalty to the club over so many years. This is a new era of leadership for the club on and off the pitch. I do recognize there has been a lot of change in recent months as we put in place new foundations for the future. We are now fully focused on stability and empowering our talented people across the club, led by Vinay and his executive team." So Vinay, who was hired as chief executive officer, will surely step in now as chairman. So just 6 weeks or so ago, maybe 8 weeks ago, 2 months ago, I did a video about how the Saudi investment was coming and changes were due to come at the top of Tottenham Hotspur. And some reports that change would include Daniel Levy being, let's just put it kindly, asked to leave. I don't know whether this is him choosing to leave or him being pushed, but it has a sense of him being at least very gently asked to leave, and he is gone. And this is what a huge corner of the Spurs fan base have asked for a long time. Now, what I would say is the reason I've never pushed hard for Daniel Levy to leave is because I don't know what comes next. And for me, unless Tottenham now have proper investment lined up, investment from, I'm afraid to say it because I don't want us to be a sports washing club, but I do want us to be able to compete with those above us. And a lot of the rumors over the years have been that Daniel Levy has been stopping that investment from happening. Jide saying, "Don't start Barnaby, you're not Nostradamus." This has happened, guys. It's been announced by the club. Daniel Levy has stepped down from the football club. That is what happens. KR, 3 a.m. in Australia, about to sleep, and this hits. Wow. And Morrison asking, is this true? Yes, it's true. Tottenham Hotspur, the club, on their official channels have announced that Daniel Levy has stepped down as chairman. This is the biggest news that has happened to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club in 25 years. This is huge upheaval in the boardroom. This is huge upheaval in the way things are done. And clearly, after this transfer window, bear in mind the transfer window only ended 3 days ago, clearly the people now in charge of the board, which I believe to be Joe Lewis's son and daughter, they've clearly decided that Tottenham, in my opinion, what has happened is they've seen that other clubs won't deal with Daniel Levy. They won't deal with Tottenham. I've talked about it in many videos, as have some of a lot of the other Spurs content creators who are do great work. Talked about how getting one over on Tottenham in the transfer market now is a big win. And now this should change. Now that Daniel Levy leaves the club, and certainly in the short time, it looks like Vinay Venkatesham will be in charge of all of the dealings, the transfer dealings, etc. I wonder how this will affect Fabio Paratici potentially coming back to Spurs. I'm going to go through Twitter. Ben Bowman says, "Do we think ENIC sell Tottenham in the next year?" Well, there's been a lot of talk about Tottenham being bought by the Saudis. Peter Charrington apparently has joined the board as non-executive chairman after Daniel Levy's departure. I don't know who Peter Charrington is, but that's what he looks like. That is what he looks like. Non-executive chairman. I would let Vinay be in charge. I don't know. I don't know how the money side of it works. I really don't. And Ben Bowman, again, if you don't follow Ben Bowman on TikTok or on YouTube, make sure you do. Really brilliant Spurs content creator saying, genuinely lost for words. It's a monumentally historic day for Spurs. It is an historic day for Tottenham Hotspur. Bear in mind, Daniel Levy was pretty much our first main chairman, other than a small period where a guy called, I think, David Buchler was in charge. In between, Irving Scholar went on to Alan Sugar, to David Buchler, to Daniel Levy. This is the first big change in 25 years. Absolutely huge. I think there has to be some investment coming in, doesn't there? Otherwise, why would this be happening? There absolutely has to be some investment coming in. Daniel Levy was the one fighting against investment unless he was allowed to stay on as chairman to lead the kind of new world of Tottenham with money to spend, with proper money to spend. Now, for me, this only works if the person or people who come in are willing to open the purse strings out more than Daniel Levy was. I'm just constantly kind of updating Twitter. It is absolutely huge. And like I said, listen, a lot of people won't want to hear this, but the reality is Daniel Levy has grown our football club to a state in which, 25 years ago, I wouldn't have ever dreamed that we would get back to this kind of size of a football club in terms of us, the stadium and revenue and what we're able to do in terms of attracting people to our club. But do I think it's time for someone new to have a chance? Yes, I absolutely do. Yes, I absolutely do. And now I think what Spurs fans need from Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and it's interesting, we don't know anything about this guy, Peter Charrington, but we need some visible communication and change. What will this mean? What will Tottenham do differently now? Because there's absolutely no point in us getting rid of Daniel Levy if we're going to just continue doing the same things. It has to be now releasing of funds, being able to invest in the team in a way that we're not able to so far. And if that involves bringing in Saudi investment, then it's not the dream in terms of sports washing, but to some degree, if you can't beat them, join them. Absolutely incredible news. I'm going to just go on to Twitter and see what Twitter is saying. Bardi from the Extra Inch did a funny tweet. 5 p.m. Levy steps down as executive chairman. 7 p.m. We'd like to introduce you to our new director of transfers, Daniel Levy. Marcus Buckland, who is the host of the Tottenham Way, another brilliant podcast, says it's what so many Spurs fans have wanted, but the timing of Daniel Levy's departure is intriguing. Looking forward to the inside story. Yeah, totally. Like I said, there has to be some inside story to this. There has to be investment coming in, or a deal coming in. What do you guys think? What do you think this actually means in terms of Tottenham Hotspur in the kind of short term? Obviously, the transfer deadline is shut, so it gives Spurs a few months to get their ducks in a row and get ready to hopefully with some investment from elsewhere, spend more money. Because if you look at what Arsenal and Chelsea and Man City and even to some degree Man United did in this window, it just leaves Spurs so far behind. I'm going to get into the comments. So Paul Jeffries says, all I hope is the new chairperson has ambition and is a football man, not a businessman. Okay, that's interesting. But realistically, Paul, at what point do you ever get a chairperson who is a football person rather than a billionaire? Grown Up North says, Charrington is a finance guy, same as Levy was. Also, statement from club that no change to the club ownership is related. But KR thinks that Saudi is coming. And Tom Nielsen says part of the takeover. I have to say, everything that I heard, and when I made that video about it just a month or so ago, is that Saudi investment is coming, that part of it will be starting with a big Saudi naming rights for the stadium deal. So this would kind of, bear in mind that Daniel Levy held about 28% of the shares in Spurs, or maybe still does. So for him to leave, if it wasn't his own choice, he would have to have been pushed by the people who've been brought into the boardroom, or by Joe Lewis's the people in charge of Joe Lewis's trust. Grown Up North says, connection to Tottenham. Charrington is a director of ENIC, the investment group that owns roughly 87% of Tottenham Hotspur, with 70% held by Joe Lewis's family trust. And I think you're going on to say they're 29% to Daniel Levy. But like I said, what is the point? If you're ENIC, right? If you're ENIC, the company who own Tottenham, what is the point of sacking Daniel Levy unless you're going to bring in someone who creates positive change and a different attitude within the fan base? So as an example, when Mike Ashley sold Newcastle, Mike Ashley was derided and hated by the Newcastle fans, absolutely despised. But if they just brought in another guy who did a similar thing, then, what would have the point have been of that? None. But instead, the Saudis came in and they started spending money straight away. So for me, unless Tottenham are making, unless this is the first part of a big change for Tottenham in terms of the investment in the club, then there is no point. And surely the Lewis family know this. Surely. A lot of people blame Daniel Levy for everything that happens that isn't good at Tottenham. But now we're going to find out because, there's a lot of ENIC out, but also Levy and ENIC kind of seem like that, right? But now we're going to really find out. Has it been Levy holding us back, or is it really ENIC holding us back? But one thing you would think surely will benefit us in the short term, at the very least, is the ability for Tottenham to do business with other clubs. The ability for Tottenham to do business with other clubs for the first time in a long time without them just being annoyed at the way they do it. Mark T is saying that ENIC have sold the club. There's certainly no evidence to back that up yet, is there? But maybe. We'll see what happens. Joe Luong, thank you for your comment, says the non-executive board will oversee Vinay. And Ronan Gray says, honestly, I don't think Levy will ever be as hated as Ashley. I think you're probably right there. James McGrath says, looks like those leaked DMs with the Spurs insider during the early part of the summer looks like to be true, according to the sister of ENIC. And Joe Long says, this is how most corporates are run. Non-executive directors overseeing the executive management team. This looks like a sound structure. Vinay is now in charge on the day-to-day basis. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But like I said, and Joe, maybe you can answer, surely this is readying us for something different. It has to be. It has to be. Otherwise, frankly, it just seems like we'll make a change to try and make ENIC more popular. But ENIC are kind of silent, aren't they, anyway? So it has to mean more, surely. I'm just going to go back on Twitter and see. I cannot wait for the next few days where they're going to be clearly like emergency podcasts and everyone trying to do a deep dive into exactly what has happened. I'm going to read what Alistair Gold says on football.london. I think he broke the story pretty much, actually. He's basically just done the quote. And the quote from Peter Charrington. And then he's added, the club stressed there are no changes to the ownership or shareholder structure of the club. So Daniel Levy will still have his 30% of the club. He says, and Alice Gold says, in December last year, ENIC injected £35 million of capital in Spurs, increasing their holding within the Premier League outfit slightly to an 87% share, up from 86.91, up from 86.58. Of that majority ENIC share of the club, a trust of which Joe Lewis's family are beneficiaries, they own 70%, whilst Levy and his family are potential beneficiaries of discretionary trusts, which own nearly 30%. So Alistair Gold hasn't really added much to it. That's fair enough because it's a brand new story. Paul O'Keefe, Paul O'Keefe's just reposted something he tweeted on July the 11th saying that understand there will be investment as well as a large sponsorship deal for Tottenham. Interestingly, the changes will see a management reshuffle as well as new roles. So yeah, Paul O'Keefe doubling down on that's what he thinks. BBC have announced it. Levy has stepped down from his role as chairman. Really amazing moment that's just come completely out of the blue for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Failagum says directors would probably disappoint how Levy handled this summer transfer window, played hardball yet promised investing heavily on players. And Roy Park says, talk about a bomber, can't get too much bigger than this. Absolutely. Heidi, thank you for your comments, says, listen, we've all hammered him, all slagged him off. I've done it, but I just wonder if a few years down the road we might regret this. Business-wise, we cannot fault them. Now, thank you for that comment. This is what I've been saying for years, although I have to admit, I've been more frustrated with Daniel Levy in this transfer window than I ever have been before. But like I said, we are now going to find out what the grass being always greener really means for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Because, listen, he ran us sustainably as a business. We never got close to any points deductions or anything like that. And in terms of revenue streams, he's built us incredibly. But now we're going to see what the grass is like on the other side, and it'll be interesting. That's for sure. Show Me Light says Aramco. I did hear that, and I made a video about it. I did hear that there was going to be a big stadium sponsorship deal, potentially with one of the Saudi oil companies, and that the Saudis were going to invest. Beniosan says, didn't he say he would be stepping back in the Vinay interview? No, he didn't. He didn't. In fact, in that Vinay interview, he talked about how they're going to work so well together. So if you take how Daniel Levy talked in that Vinay interview, you would say, surely he's been pushed. Surely he's been pushed. B3CK, Beck210 says, I hope we bring in a Saudi guy to just give us that cash boost so we don't have to have any more being careful with money and trying to get the cheapest option. Listen, if Saudis come in, it's not just going to be one Saudi guy. It's going to be the Saudi government. And the way they will sell it so as to get through the kind of fit and proper person's chairman's test would be that it's kind of fronted by a Saudi businessman. But trust me, it would be part of the public investment fund. It would be Spurs, in essence, being owned by the same people as Newcastle. That is how it would be in reality. That is the fact of it. But, ENIC have come out today and said there's no current change in the ownership structure or model. But really, let's see what happens. Really, really mad moment today for Spurs. I'm just looking to see if I can find a way to share this. I want to try and get some people on to talk about this with me during the. Okay, that's how I can do that, and then send that to myself. Fascinating. Honestly, I we've talked a lot, haven't we, down the years about Daniel Levy leaving, but actually it actually happening. It's so wild. It's so completely wild what's happened. It's completely mad, isn't it? Exciting in a way, but also kind of leaves a feeling of now what? It's very, very odd. I'm just looking for my. In the chat, guys, Barry Riss says, absolutely over the moon, made my day, made my year. I'm just texting. Just trying to get people on. Kempston Spurs says, Ricky Sachs talking bollocks on Sky Sports News, moaning about Levy at Spurs, but conveniently forgetting Chelsea and Man City have been breaking rules over spending with sugar daddies. But Kempston, listen, Ricky's a really great bloke and he's a really good podcaster, to be fair. But are you suggesting that you now want Spurs to start breaking rules? Because Daniel Levy's spoken a lot, hasn't he, about how he doesn't see the Chelsea and the Man City model as being sustainable, and Tottenham are able to do this sustainably. But are you now at the point where you basically want the Saudis or the Qataris to come in and for Spurs to break rules too? Is that what you want? Tor Nielsen says, news released 15 minutes ago. That's right. P-Man says, thank you, Daniel, for our magnificent stadium and making Tottenham into a global brand. All the best to you. Yeah, I appreciate that positivity, mate. I appreciate that positivity. Wesley says, I'll only take Saudi investment, not owners, rather do USA. Well, if Saudis are going to invest, they're going to want a piece of the pie as well. Then nobody's going to invest for nothing. So it's kind of hard to think about having it both ways, really. But listen, there's going to be change. Like that's the reality. There's going to be change. And Tottenham, there's a literal Tottenham protest group called Change for Tottenham, and that's what's been called for. And frankly, Tottenham have answered, haven't they? And Daniel Levy is gonski. Alan Hogan says, a really good podcaster. There's the rub. What do you mean? I was talking about Ricky Sachs. He is good. And also he has a huge audience. So there we go. Benyason says, can we give Levy a testimonial? And Barry Riss, so I just wish Levy would have gone before this summer window. But we don't know, do we? That's the thing. We don't know. We don't know what's going to come next. So, it's one thing saying I wish he'd gone before the window, but we don't know that it means that ENIC are going to spend any more money. That's the reality of it. Colin Pillay, thanks for your comment, says Andrew's right about season 2. He knew something was in the pipeline behind the scenes. Maybe, but I get the sense from that comment from Daniel Levy, Andrew Postecoglou, that he didn't quite know that he was going to get sacked. Tor asks, what do we think about the timing here? It happened straight after the window closes. Yeah, I mean, I guess realistically, if you look back at the summer, they had to sack Ange Postecoglou, then they had to get in a new manager, and then they had to let the new manager choose who he wanted to keep and sell and sign. And then finally the window shuts, Levy's kind of on some quiet time, and then they let him go. I mean, if you go by what Paul O'Keefe said in those tweets, there was talk of big management restructure from the beginning of June after Spurs won that the Europa League. So it's kind of in keeping with that. Do we think Daniel Levy knew it was coming? Why would he have sat down with Vinay if he knew this was coming? That's kind of what I would ask. That's very difficult to kind of know, really. Stefan Borson, who's a Man City expert and a financial expert, says this: very odd for someone on a £3 million salary and a 25% shareholding to simply walk away without even a non-executive role. Well, what I'd say is he keeps his shares, that's for sure. Jay Harris from View from the Lane says, huge news as Daniel Levy is stepping down after nearly 25 years as Tottenham Hotspur chairman. Peter Charrington has been appointed to the newly created role of non-executive chairman. Nobody quite knows what that means at the moment. Holly Agomba, who's a Spurs content creator, says, honestly, never thought this day would come. And Billy T says, seriously, though, what do we do now? Yeah, it's true. What do we do now? It's completely mad, isn't it? It's really, really strange. It feels a bit like, I mean, I don't want to complain because obviously a lot of Spurs fans have been begging for this for a long time, but it feels a bit like Tottenham have kind of made this huge decision, but without kind of any, and this is what's coming next. Because I don't think Spurs fans will be happy if it's like just Levy is replaced by another suit and there's no kind of communication as to whether there'll be more money to spend or, more investment from elsewhere or anything like that. Dev Soul says, is Amanda Staveley... sorry, I put the wrong one there. Dev Soul says, is Amanda Staveley working for the club in any capacity? No, all we heard about Amanda Staveley a while ago is that she was potentially interested in putting a consortium together to look to buy Spurs, but there's been no more news about that. KR says, I'm sure something big is coming. And Dev Sol rightly says, I thought he was on 6.5 million salary. Yeah, I think you're right, actually, there. Phil Tang, will he still attend games, I wonder? Surely not. He gets so much abuse as it is. Surely not. James McGrath says, plot twist, Vinay is the replacement for Levy. RJ says, do you think Xavi Simons knew this as he signed his new deal and that's why he said yes to coming? No, I don't think so. I don't think players really care about stuff like that. They just care about realistically what their money is going to be. Barry Reese says, what does this mean for Moneybags Lewis? Surely he'll be moving on too. Well, he's put his shares in a trust, hasn't he? And it's his kids who are in charge of that trust. I just asked Sonny Snelling from Sonny Talk Spurs. If you don't follow that, make sure you do. He asked him if he wanted to come on, and he said, sorry, mate, just sorting my own video. Leaving news interrupted my dinner, so we'll have to finish that first. There we go. Yeah, I think everyone is just hectically, all Spurs content creators right now, hectically trying to get videos sorted out. I'm sure everybody is online at the moment, but thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your support for coming on here. Do give this video a like if you haven't already. If you're not a subscriber to my channel for daily Tottenham news and views, do press that subscribe button. Also, I'm really close to 20,000 subscribers now. So if you're not a subscriber and you like the cut of my jib, do press that subscribe button with the notification bell and help me towards that 20,000. Tan Koya says, no excuses anymore. That's it. That's what I'm saying is, it's one thing getting rid of him, but what if it really, ENIC is still there as far as we know. L. Thomas, thank you for your comments. Barnaby, you're assuming this was planned. What if he's just resigned because he doesn't like any coming changes? Yeah, and listen, one thing we know about football clubs is they are, so leaky. So I'm sure Spurs will be trying to kind of own this narrative over the next few days. And journalists like Jack Pitt-Brooke, Alistair Gold, Jay Harris, Paul O'Keefe to some degree will all be telling us in their own way over the next few days exactly what has happened. Michael Roster says, now we'll see if Levy really was the problem. I suspect he won't be. And by which you mean, I assume that you think ENIC are really the biggest problem. Yeah, we will find out. We will find out one way or the other. What changes will happen coming soon. And Lee McQueen has just reposted something he posted about Donna Marie Cullen leaving back at the beginning of June, where he said she didn't stand down, she was stood down. More changes to come, and you won't believe it. So that would imply, wouldn't it, that there is going to be big change, and possibly, I mean, from that, I would suggest investment. Basically, that is what I would suggest might be coming. I'm just trying to look to see what people are saying on Twitter. Just a mad moment, isn't it, in Spurs history, really? And Akash says, is this legit? Yes, it's as legit as it comes. Daniel Levy has stepped down as the Tottenham chairman. Michael says, Levy always hinted that he wanted to spend more but wasn't allowed. I don't remember him hinting that, to be honest, Mike. I'm not sure. Tor Nilsson says he was more disappointed than me after the Bournemouth game. Yeah, I don't think it was anything about that. And Dev says, I feel like Lewis's kids probably would rather cash in. Club is valued at, I don't know what that means, 88 there. David says, hopefully this is part of the board's re-imaging of the club. The views of us, especially in the transfer market, penny pinching and other terrible optics of the last few seasons. One thing I would agree with, and I've said a number of times on my videos, the optics of some of the decisions that Daniel Levy has made over the years, the furloughing of the staff, sacking Martin Jol at halftime, sacking Ange Postecoglou after winning a trophy, many others that I can't think. Oh, the Super League, obviously. He does make a lot of mistakes like that, but at the same time, he has grown our club absolutely, off the charts. And for that, he said, didn't he, in his interview, he imagines he'll get more credit for what he's done after he leaves. And I don't think it'll be any time soon, but I think down the line, he may not be massively wrong, because he has what he's done brilliantly is put the building blocks in place for Tottenham Hotspur to be a massive club. Now, what needs to happen is investment, because ENIC literally are an investment company who don't want to spend their own money. They'll happily put money into infrastructure with loans, etc. But now what we need is investment. And I was sat next to at lunch today. I was sat next to a Nottingham Forest fan, and I was taking the piss out of him over Mr. Marinakis and all that stuff over the summer. And he was like, "Yeah, you and Crystal Palace fans, you can take the piss all you like, but he is a brilliant chairman, and he has done incredible things for us. And he spends money left, right, and centre. And frankly, listen." What we need now, I don't want Mr. Marinakis. I don't want someone who's been, accused of all sorts of criminality. Although there is an argument to say that when you're a billionaire, you haven't got there by being the nicest man in the world. But we want someone, to come in now and create genuine change at Tottenham Hotspur. A big part of the negativity today in the last 45 minutes has been swept out of the club. A huge part of the negativity. Now, Tottenham, take advantage of that to bring positivity and communicate to the fans, to the people who pay the highest ticket prices in the country, and possibly in Europe and maybe further afield too, communicate to us that there is going to be positive change that will allow this club that has the building blocks in place to fight with those above us in terms of wages, in terms of transfer fees, in terms of getting the best players around. Because I'll tell you what would be very Tottenham and what would lead to us being memed again is if the chairman who all the Spurs or a big corner of the Spurs fan base wanted out leaves, and then Tottenham just remain Tottenham. That would almost be the biggest meme thing that could happen to a football club. Whereas when Newcastle get rid of their guy that they hate, it all changes straight away. And the only thing holding them back from being one of the most successful clubs in the world, Newcastle, is that they haven't got the infrastructure with which to create and build the revenue streams. So Tottenham have that in place. So for this really to be a genuinely incredible day for Spurs, they need to communicate better to us, something better than, Peter Suti McSuterson is the new non-executive chairman. Well, we don't know what that means, right? And we don't care. We want somebody to come in, or people to come in who will invest in the club to push us to a place that we have not been. That's what we need. That's what Tottenham need. And until until the next hours and days come, we will not know what happens next. Stefan Borson again says, it's not odd that Levy steps down from a day-to-day executive position. Hiring a CEO was a clue there. Complete exit is the unusual move. Paul O'Keefe is going on last word in Spurs. So last word on Spurs is on tonight, and Paul O'Keefe is on it. So that'll be a good one for you guys to tune into later on. I'm not sure exactly what time that will start. I'm just going through Twitter to see if there's any kind of latest news. The Fighting Cock have just said this is huge. I mean, yeah, it doesn't get any bigger than this. It really doesn't. Henry Winter says, bit of a surprise. Daniel Levy steps down as executive chairman. Club says there are no changes to the ownership or shareholder structure of the club. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't going to be. There's no changes right now, but it doesn't mean that there couldn't be. Really interesting to see. I hope, but we don't know if it's going to happen. I hope this is like one of those kind of cascading situations where you get the first bit of news and then, relatively quickly over days, weeks, you start getting, a real viewpoint of why this change has happened, what's happening. Ben Brown says, Suti McSuterson out. Yeah. Martin Redwood, who is a friend of mine, hi Martin, says, Levy in transformed the club. Listen, Martin is right in one way, in that Daniel Levy did absolutely transform the club. Martin and I are old enough to remember how bad it was before, how bad it was under Alan Sugar, how Alan Sugar, upset the fans by casting out Terry Venables, who was the darling of the fans, who was an incredible manager for Spurs, won us the FA Cup and was trying to put the building blocks in place to make Spurs a great club, but also, arguably a bit of a, rest in peace, Terry Venables, but also a bit of a rogue trader when it came to this. One thing you can say about Daniel Levy is the opposite of a rogue trader. He made Spurs sustainable. He grew Spurs through infrastructure. Like I said, he put the plans in place for Spurs to become an absolutely enormous club. And now what Tottenham need to do is make the most of that. Benison says, we've always been massive. Let's see how we go. The changes to PSR to a percentage of income model would be insane for us. That is happening, Benison. That is happening. That's happening after this season. That's why Aston Villa are absolutely ruined. But Spurs are too low in that. Spurs are at like 40% of our revenue. Phil Tang says, I reckon this will be on national news, not just sports news. Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Peter says, does this mean the F1 kart track will be ripped up? No more Guns N' Roses? No, of course it won't. Because I promise you guys, those people who complain about things like concerts at the stadium and the F1 track, they're only complaining because Spurs aren't winning enough trophies or aren't challenging for the league. If and when we get to that point, everyone will be like, oh, that was the best thing that Daniel Levy ever did, because it means we're able to have the revenue to buy the players within the rules. The issue has been that the club aren't willing to spend their own money to buy those players. So, those things down the line will be seen as genius moves from Daniel Levy. And some of us already see that. But now what we need is the investment so we can spend the money that we're allowed to spend via the rules. Newcastle are the richest club in the world, but they're not allowed to spend money. Aston Villa want to spend more money. They're not allowed to spend money. But Tottenham can. And what this day needs to start is a series of events that leads to proper investment in Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, so we can look ahead and think, okay, now we are going to be challenging the likes of Chelsea, who are just hoovering up the best young talent across Europe in a weird way. Gary rides bikes bad. He says, lads, what a day. I could shed a tear. Peter Colliman says, Charrington will be an interim chairman. I think you're right. And I think, if anything, and I could be wrong, but I think if anything, this will almost like they've swept Levy away. And what they're saying now to potential investors is, okay, the person who was causing the biggest sticking point to you wanting to buy Tottenham Hotspur or invest in Tottenham Hotspur has now gone. We will open conversations with you about what you want to do next. And that could be, take sports washing away, because, it's not ideal, right? But realistically, if Qatar or Saudi come in, and buy Spurs for, 3.5 billion, 4 billion pounds or something like that, then Tottenham very quickly, by which I mean within a year or two, could potentially become a huge force. Let's see what happens. WK Chun says, only idiots who don't know finances are bitching about concerts. Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. And Vekari says, the thing is, being low at 40% means we can poach players from teams that need to make cuts. Yeah, but that's not what Tottenham should be doing. Tottenham shouldn't be opportunist, and that's where we've got to go. Being opportunistic in the transfer market was Daniel Levy's thing. Let's thank Daniel Levy for what he's done, move on, and now talk solely about being a club who can mix it with those clubs who are spending big. Liverpool, perfect example. Now, Liverpool are, of course, a legacy club, absolutely massive in the 70s and 80s, and therefore have a huge worldwide fan base. But over the course of 10 years, before and during when Pochettino was manager, we finished, I think we finished above Liverpool like 8 out of 10 years or 10 out of 12 years. And what Liverpool did was they appointed a manager with a huge personality who drove Liverpool on, and then they backed him because they had new owners, FSG, who came in from America, and they backed him. And they had to go through some difficult patches. Selling Coutinho, their fans didn't want that, but they took that 120 million and they then bought Van Dijk and Alisson. Now Tottenham can't do that historically under Daniel Levy because of the wages and because he wants to do it all sustainably, and ENIC won't put the money in. Well, now Daniel Levy is gone, and this has to mean genuine change where now we can do that. We can do things like that going forward. Philip Mills says, didn't ENIC invest a wedge during the summer, or were those reports fake? Well, lots of reports over the summer, which started with Donna Marie Cullen leaving, a boardroom change around, and lots of reports that Daniel Levy would leave. And now that has happened. And the other reports were that Saudi investment was coming, starting with a huge stadium sponsorship deal, and then moving on potentially to them investing in, if not owning, the club. Tor Nielsen makes a good point here, actually, which he says we spent fourth or fifth most over the last 10 years. It's not 10 years, it's 6 years. It's since we moved into the stadium. But yes, we have. Jersey Peter asks, has Ali Gold gone on holiday again? No, he's not. He actually kind of broke it, I think. And Versimilitude says, whoa, we're halfway there. Whoa, let's see what happens. And Chish says, this is shocking news. It is absolutely shocking news. Stephen Wilson says, there is a God after all. Let's see what happens. Niall O'Connor, thanks for your comment, says, would we rather a chairman who cares about the club or a chairman who wants to buy the club as a flex? I think it's an interesting question. I think what a lot of Spurs fans want is a chairman and an ownership structure where we are able to compete with those clubs around us in the traditional big six or whatever you want to call it. That is what the Spurs fan base want. Peter Callum says, slow release of info as is needed. Surely the stock exchange will need to be advised. No, because we're not any longer on the stock exchange, are we? We were taken off the stock exchange by ENIC. So they wouldn't have to be told. Jennifer, thank you for your comments. Says, I've been a critic of Levy for years, but this feels sudden and a little sad, which is unexpected. Hopefully foreign investment won't change Tottenham's core identity. Come on, you Spurs. It's a difficult one. I know exactly what you're saying, but what is Tottenham's core identity? Tottenham's core identity over the last 15 years has been a club trying to grow and trying to grow sustainably. I think it's fair to say what we all want now to some degree is proper, quick growth. I think when you look at some of the investment that's happened around us recently, if you look at Chelsea, like Chelsea have had it twice. They've had it twice. Abramovich comes in, just spunks £200 million, which back then was the equivalent of about £500 million on pretty much his first day. Man City, first day, they try and buy, everyone. They tried to buy Berbatov. They tried to buy Ronaldo, I think. In the end, they got Robinho, right? And that was twice, and actually 3 times if you count. Then the second time with Chelsea, Todd Bowley, buys Chelsea because Abramovich has been politically stunted and had all his assets seized. And then Todd Bowley comes in and they spend £2 billion. How are Tottenham, when they're trying to be run sustainably, going to compete with that? And they can't. So something now needs to change properly, that the club come out and communicate with us saying, these are what we're going to put in place be that investment or selling the club, to make us as a club in this amazing situation we're in, with this amazing stadium, the highest ticket prices. These are the plans we're going to put in place to now be able to challenge the very top of the Premier League. And one of the main reasons, again, while I think about it, as to why it must be that Daniel Levy was pushed rather than chose to leave himself, is because he did that interview with Vinay where he said, I want to win the Champions League. I want to win the Premier League. So he wasn't thinking of leaving then, and that was only 2 months ago. So he's definitely been pushed. Brian Maguire says, big question, who takes over from Daniel Levy? I mean, frankly, at the moment, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But I guess this was the first thing. Sean Walsh on Twitter says this. I don't know if he's a Spurs fan. Let's see. Daniel Levy from 2001 to 2017 was, for me, unquestionably one of the best chairmen in football. Ran Spurs exactly the way a football club of that size ought to have been run. 2018 to the present, a different story, and it's belatedly the right time to change. Foundations are all there. So I would guess he is definitely a Spurs fan. I think that's a fair point. Harry Scarf, another great content creator. Make sure you follow him if you don't. He says, this is a big shock. Thank you, Daniel, for everything you've done off the pitch with the new stadium, new facilities, and everything on the business side. This is the end of poor managerial decisions, from sackings to appointments, though. We must now unite to remove ENIC. And Russ Williams, broadcaster, and also is on The Last Word on Spurs a lot. Make sure you follow Russ if you don't already. Says, 25 years in any job is a long while. I suspect Daniel Levy, on reflection, will accept that his exemplary business acumen was never a comfortable bedfellow with the business of football, which is often like the Wild West. Wish him well, but intrigued about the future, Levy-less. And Prem Inside says, Daniel Levy gone. Wow, I can only see this being the setup to the club being sold. This is genuinely about to be a brand new era of Tottenham Hotspur. That is what we want. That is what we want. Stephen Borston says this. Harrington, who's been announced as the non-executive director, is very much a Joe Lewis-linked director. Of course, worth remembering, Joe Lewis is no longer the Spurs owner. It is a Joe Lewis family trust that owns 70% of ENIC, and not Lewis. In brackets, Harrington also an ENIC director, and also coincidentally lives in the Bahamas, which is where Joe Lewis lives. So obviously a lot of speculation at the moment. We don't have any definite answers. David J. So Spurs have always been a big club. ENIC took over the club when the Premier League became huge, so they got lucky. That's not to say Levy was a bad businessman. His penny pinching held us back, though. I mean, we're going to find out, aren't we, whether it really was Daniel Levy's penny pinching or whether it was ENIC. Katie, thank you for your comments. As Vinay's CEO in consultation with Charrington, they are the new bosses. It does seem that way at the moment. And Branch of the Vine says, think Joe Lewis's daughter rallied the board to oust Levy. Mike says, who might be interested in buying the club? I mean, the Middle East, to say the least, I would say at this point. James McGrath says, things like Levy stepping down had been done back in June, July privately. I bet investments have already been done, but it's just a matter of time before investments are made publicly to experts. And Chish says, when I heard the news, I was mostly shocked. I always wanted this, but I wasn't jumping for joy. I just hope the transition is fairly smooth and what we need. Guys, thank you so much for getting involved. I really appreciate it. Look, I'm going to jump off now, but if there's any more news over the next hours, I will jump back on, and then I will get all the news together, all the quotes together, and do a video for you first thing in the morning. If not, if I don't do another live show today, but I wanted to jump on straight away. This is incredible news for Spurs, and hopefully the start of a new era. Come on, you Spurs.